Welcome back, everybody. We're going to do a storage provider meetup right now and cover a number of issues that are near and dear to your heart. I know we've had a week off and there's been a number of things going on that you're all very interested in. So I'm going to cut right to them really quickly. It's going to be a pretty fast moving episode to kind of get through because we've got a number of things to cover, and then we'll just kind of turn it over to you for the normal questioning. So to begin with, I want to let me get my notes here. To begin with, I want to just cover a couple of the update things, and then we'll get into the gist of the stuff having to do with the network and where we are with launch and data that's on the network and blah blah blah. The licensing update. I'm going to kind of cover sort of architectural development as well as the actual, software development that we're currently doing and so forth, just so you have an understanding of what the timelines truly look like and what you can expect and so forth. So at this point, we had a number of things we needed to do to get up to where we are. Well, the whole idea of licensing the network, when we finally landed on it, if you go back and you remember sort of how we got to where we are, the idea was we were going to make sort of a helium style decision to say, it didn't really make sense to really go forward with DIY because it was quite likely there wasn't going to be that many DIY providers in the world, and that we'd build a group, but at the end of the day, they would slow down anyway, and it would just become a thing that we'd grandfather, but other than that, we wouldn't probably carry forward. Well, enough people convinced me otherwise on that, and I think they made a good case, and ultimately there's value in us allowing that to carry forward. But it still made a lot of sense to sort of say, well, look, I mean, if you're going to be part of that, then there's still this development thing that we've got to get over. And what I think is always important to remind you folks is that we're really a different project than everything else that you see. I mean, we're not the same project. We didn't go out and raise a big ICO in 2017. We didn't get $30 million like Storage or $260 million like Filecoin. We didn't get that, right? We never had that money. We've never had that kind of money. What happened with us was we started with no money. We started with zero. And it was just some dudes that got together and just forked a coin and just said, you know what, let's start building our own software. And, in the beginning, there was 6 to 8 months where we just did it all on spec. We just did it gratis. There was really nothing. There was no financial incentive, which was funny because back then we were robustly and roundly and frequently accused of just being in it to, build, dump a coin and make a lot of money. And there were like thousands of ways to do it that would have been much more efficient than the way we did it, which ended up being work really freaking hard to get something off the ground. So when we did finally start raising, we raised from some angels and we just got some small amounts of money. We didn't get huge amounts. These weren't like whales. They're just guys that had done fairly well in their lives and had some extra money, and they bought shares of stock in our corporation, and we were able to kind of continue the thing and keep it running. And then as we began to start to deliver software to the world and people could see, okay, yeah, some of this stuff really works. This is okay. We were able to gain a little bit more to keep the engine turning, but we didn't get giant amounts. We still didn't get giant amounts. And then, we got to this place where people were really able to start to see what it was. And so there's been a couple of little minor, infusions that have worked. But then what happened was we released this Examiner, and the Examiner worked really well. And then we got a pretty good chunk of capital influx off of Examiner sales. But even there, you have to remember how we've done things. There's no profit in Examiner sales for us. We're not making any profit on them, right? And in hindsight, if we fail, people are going to look back and say, the way Files did this was just fucking stupid. They didn't make any money, and they tried hard not to make any money, and so they lost and failed, and it's because, of that idiocy. And I'll accept that if that's what it turns out to be. But look, at the end of the day, the whole idea with the Examiners is that there's a rebate, and the rebate essentially gives you all the profitability potentially that's on the unit. We don't keep it. It's yours. And the reason we can justify that is because let's say some big data center, Azure, Google, AWS, whoever, they want to go out and they want to build a data center. What ends up happening is they've got to find a piece of ground. They've got to, get architects involved. They've got to pay a lot of money up front to municipalities. They may get tax breaks, but at the end of the day, they're going to put a lot of money into design and configuration and politicking to make it work. And then ultimately they got to go and spend all the money to build the buildings and build the cooling facilities and build all the servers and hire all the 24/7 personnel and, managers and everything that's going to happen. And then of course they've got giant, internet connectivity that they've got to put in and, very expensive proposition. And typically that's going to be a gigantic capital expenditure for the corporation who's putting the data center in. We're very fortunate in that our data center is self-organizing, right? When you buy an Examiner and stand it up, you are helping build our data center. So we felt it was okay to make a push there. We didn't need to make money off you to do that. But by the same token, you had to put some skin in the game, and that's actually paying for the unit. And by paying a retail price up front for the unit, and then getting a rebate in our SCP coins, what you're essentially doing is you're loaning the developers money. And, the developers use that to develop the software. And then ideally what we expect to happen is as we are able to start delivering the product to market, we'll sell storage to the world, and then we'll book revenues on that storage against the data center that you and we have built together. And then those revenues will pick up and take over for paying our developers. We're still going to keep going out and looking to raise capital in the private markets, of course. But at the end of the day, we are a product, company, whatever you want to call us, that expects to live and die on the strength of our products. And that is so different in crypto that everybody else really builds a mechanism so that they can live and die on, all the chicanery that goes on and all the private, transfers of money that are happening that you never see. And, people selling NFTs to themselves for crazy, absurd amounts of money so that they can then jack the price up that they sell to somebody else. There's just nonsense throughout the whole space. And we're nothing about any of that sort of stuff. We're about selling products. So what happens here then with licensing is we go ahead and we decide to, allow it to work forward. And of course, up front, we did it in a way that we said, same thing, rebates are going to be applied. We set some deadlines to kind of force you guys to the table. You surprised us and did a really good job with it. We got a very high number of participants out of the gate. We got some grumbling, but mostly we got really good uptake. And then we've got the long tail stragglers that are showing up one by one going, what's this about? And how stupid is this? And who do I see about this? And, somebody wants to come to my house and break my jaw. It's like, it's fun. But at the end of the day, I think we're now coming around to that place where we understand what it looks like. And what it looks like is about 1,500 basic licenses sold, about 150 full licenses sold. There's probably going to be another 1 to 2, maybe 300 that convert from the remainder. Remember, there's about 1,000 Examiners online. So that gives you an idea. We're going to lose 1,000 or 1,500 provider instances over coming weeks of folks that decide not to go ahead and uptake the license. I don't know why they're sticking around. I guess they're sticking around because they're getting a couple of coins and they just, or they don't know or whatever. But we're going to lose that. We're only going to lose about 16 petabytes worth of capacity when they go, and maybe even not that much. That's the max. We might lose as little as 10 if a bunch of them turn out and decide to license and go forward. And yeah, even though it's going to suck because you all did what you were supposed to, we'll probably, run another grace on the rebate period, and we'll see how that works out as our final move into the end of July. The first step was getting the licenses tied with your provider ID. We've got that. The next step is we've got to get that set up so that you can easily and robustly go in and change the email behind it and, drop one provider ID or associate them with a different license key and do all that sort of stuff. We're working on it. It's just time that, it's a time constraint. I expect that we'll probably have that part of it, finished by the end of this month, and you'll be able to do whatever you need to do there. The next piece is this idea of the um, auto reannouncements and auto pricing. And we've kind of wrestled with that as far as how we ought to do it. And I think we've kind of come around to an understanding about, where and how it needs to be done. It's probably going to get baked directly into the daemon. But if not, it'll be handled by a mini supervisor. But I think it's going to get baked directly into the daemon, and we'll go from there, which means it's a Golang core developer job. And man, I just need about 5 or 6 more of those Golang core backend developer type folks, because I just don't have enough. And at the end of the day, that's going to take a little bit. But like I said, we're shooting for the end of this month on that, but it might stretch a little bit longer out in order to get that happen. It's not a huge issue. You can continue to use DDNS right now, even though Duck is kind of giving us issues. But I understand that it's a thing, and of course, if we were to get DDoSed right now, it'd become a big thing because everybody would want to be on IP addresses and not on DDNS. So we know it's important. That's the next really kind of big thing on the roadmap. It's just I have to get a development resource in place to be able to do it. The next one is this full version. And what's going on there is we have a core developer on the back end porting over the supervisor that's inside the examiners into a Windows environment, because a pretty high number of the full license purchasers right now are Windows people. So it's going to be the primary sort of area. We originally thought about doing this all in a 100% containerized sort of way, but as we really worked through it and talked about it and talked about support and the way it all works, we've just concluded that a native Windows app and the version that we run on Linux that looks very similar to what we're currently running on the Xminer is probably the best strategy. It's probably not likely that we'll do a Mac version anytime soon, but if we can do a containerized version on Linux, it shouldn't be very hard to run some sort of a Docker install on Mac to make that sort of happen if you absolutely have to run this thing on a Macintosh. The full version, though, is probably 2 to 4 weeks out from getting supervisor completely ported, and then we're probably another 2 to 3 weeks out after that. So you're looking at 2 months from today probably before that full version is actually running and your DIY looks exactly like an Examiner. I'm sorry about that, but it just is the nature of the beast with this development stuff and where we are. We have bitten off a candy bar that is so giant that it just takes bites and bites and bites and bites and bites, and we're just getting to them as we can. Now, an interesting part about all that, by the way, is that we're currently paying out somewhere in the neighborhood of $75,000 a month in salaries to fund the development squad that we currently have on staff. So it's not like we don't have a bunch of guys really efforting away, and it's not like I don't crack a whip. I mean, they work their butts off, and they're getting a lot of work done. It's just that we're building such a complicated, fundamental, gigantic, important, filled with security concerns. I mean, everything that we do has to be triple checked. And one of the things I think you have to recognize is that we haven't really had any severe breakdown. I mean, I'm crossing my fingers that one doesn't show up immediately, but, at the end of the day, we haven't had any severe meltdowns. We just haven't. And even though December came along and crushed some things on our network and really made some things a little bit challenged, we were still alive and clearly functional, and things were working. Yeah, Grafana became a joke to everybody, yes, but Grafana was frosting, right? I mean, it was stuff on top that essentially just sort of talked about what was going on underneath. The stuff underneath never got affected. It was just sort of the layer that reported on the underneath. And so I think that's really an important sort of factor. And yes, I am looking for additional development resourcing at this point, but we're being a little bit more picky about that now, and we can be, and so we're not just rushing out to find people and onboard them, and at the end of the day, when you're burning through that kind of a cash rate that we are, it starts to get pretty scary, because if we don't really have any money, and we don't, and we're just sort of self-funding this thing on a bootstrap basis off of licensing and Examiner sales, we're literally always looking out a few months out there and saying, oh my God, are we going over Niagara Falls in a barrel? And the answer is yes, we could be. And we're just, this whole thing is built on faith. I mean, it's built on a giant faith that we're going to make it work. The good news is we've had a long-standing failure to launch syndrome that we've had to get past. And in the past, looking on it in hindsight, you can sort of understand it, and you can say, yeah, okay, it makes sense you didn't launch in 2019. It makes sense you didn't launch in 2020. It makes sense you didn't launch in 2021. But now in 2022, it's getting a little harder to say, does it make sense that you've not launched? And, when we got to NAB and showed off the product as it was, a lot of people were pretty enthusiastic about what we'd put together. But at the end of the day, when we got back to the shop and said, okay, let's go ahead and do this, and then, a few people had to raise their hands and say, yeah, but except, you remember, this is kind of like not really working yet, right? And so we've had to kind of go back and, make all of that stuff work that needed to be. But you know what? We're really there now. We're there, and yeah, it's not completed. It's not like, we're ready to tackle the world and we have a, full blown thing and blah, blah, blah. But it's pretty good. And it's got most of what it needs right now for most, archival storage needs, which is who we said we were targeting out of the gate and go to market. So once we get this next relayer build shipped, which is either today or tomorrow, I think we're pretty good to go, and I'm okay with actually onboarding people and saying, look, let's bring you on and try it out for a little bit, and if it's working good for you, we'll convert you over into a paying account, and let's go ahead and get your storage on the network. And lo and behold, we're now starting to see the people show up, say, hey, I have 30 petabytes under management, and I'm thinking about throwing it on here, and let's give it a try and see how it works. And then you talk to them a little bit, and they say, yeah, I've actually had my relayer up and running now for about 30 days, and it's doing pretty good. So that's where we are. And, it's going to be that kind of thing where if you're not really paying attention, you're going to look at it one day and you're going to say, what happened with those guys? And the next day you're going to look at it and you're going to say, holy cow, when did this happen? And that's where we are. So licensing and software development in order to get your hosts up to Examiner spec will just sort of happen organically through that process. It does and is on our roadmap. It does and is get priority, but at the same time, we still have to launch this underlying product, so that gets a slightly higher priority, and that's what's going on. Let's jump ahead real quickly to Examiner sales shipping update. So in regards of Examiner sales, what's happened is we pushed all the way through the wait lists. We now have orders taken from, the people that wanted them. There's been a very interesting thing happen, for lack of a better word. And I think some of you actually, I did meet some of you in Las Vegas, and I didn't have as much time to meet you guys as I wish I had. But and by the time we had that party, I was just wiped out. So I really I wasn't a genial host, and I wasn't really in the best of places to really get out there and get to know you. But I think a lot of you think that I'm just this dour individual who just sort of like frets all day long and is angry at the entire world and does whatever. And it's just so completely the opposite. But the funny part about it is throughout the history of the project, we've always had, people show up and be either ill-informed or, a little robust in their commentary about the project and so forth. But it's turned a corner over the last 60 days. I'll attribute 30% of that to the macro, the economy and inflation and everything. Crypto melting down in general, and all the stuff that's going on with Luna and Terra and NFTs and all that stuff. So that's a lot of it. I'm sure a lot of that. The people in this room, probably a lot of money has been lost. There are, some other things that are going on that I'll go ahead and subscribe 30% to. But then, 30% is just us, right? Just where we've been and sort of how long it's taken us to get off the ground, and how much money you're making versus how much the YouTube guy said you were going to make. Nerdy dude told me I was going to be rich by now, and how come I'm not rich? I'm not only not rich, I'm poor, and they're telling me I got to spend more money on licenses and shit like that. Well, that was okay, and we could deal with that for a while, but it's taken a turn, and it's interesting to me. I get 3 or 4 emails every day now, which are just nothing but raw invectives. They're just fuck you. We'd never buy your bullshit network, piece of shit. Every curse word you can imagine. We get 1 or 2 people showing up in the Discord every week that are ready to go ahead and go hammer tongs at it. And I just kind of I know exactly where we are. I mean, it's not even registering with me in a lot of ways because I get it. I totally understand where we are and why we are there. And all I can really say is I just have this ability to say, if you can see the future like I do, and you have the faith that I bring to this, we're going to be fine. It's all going to be fine. You just have to play the card here that we've laid out, and if you stick it through, you're going to see it. So, in the Examiner sales and shipping update, one of the things that I'm working on right now is an ROI matrix, and this will apply to DIY. So I'm just doing it for the Examiners just to show people, but you'll be able to use it for your DIY providers to sort of get an understanding. And what I've done is I've essentially taken, let me pull up my spreadsheet here for a second. What I've done is I've sort of just taken it and said, well, look, let's just say you're working on a 5-year plan, right? And if you're on a 5-year plan, the way this whole thing is going to work is different from other projects, right? It's not like you're going to start off and earn X and then you'll just keep earning X. But if maybe things get saturated, maybe you'll earn a little less than X. And then if things get really oversaturated in the area you're in, then you'll earn a lot less than X. That probably rings true for some other projects you're involved in. That's not how this is going to work. The way this is going to work, you're going to start off and earn nothing. And very slowly, you will start to get terabytes onto your system. And then slowly but surely, they will continue to grow and continue to grow. And so what I've done is I've made a 60-month matrix and then, started adding a conservative amount of gigabytes every single month, starting off fairly slowly and ultimately ending up to where you're, 85 to 90% filled up on a 64 terabyte unit at the end of 5 years, right? Because that's kind of how I see it working. And what'll end up happening is we have put in place the roadmapped items and the actual items that will ensure it works that way. So, for instance, even if it ultimately turns out that after year 4, you don't have, 72% of your storage filled up, your continuous time in service bonus will ensure you're getting paid more in such a way as if you did, or if you were comping to somebody else who got a whole bunch of storage that blew by you because they were next to 20 relayers and you were only next to 3 relayers or something along those lines. And so you didn't see your storage grow as fast as them. We're building in the mechanisms so that everybody will end up getting storage or storage funding or incentive funding in such a way that you will make out. But the whole notion is that if you think about how that works, so that you start out slow and you're growing and you're growing, it's a subscription revenue thing, right? Now, it isn't going to be the thing where customer A shows up, puts on a terabyte of storage, and it stays there in perpetuity. There will be customers that will put a terabyte online, and then 3-6 months later, they'll pull it down, right? That's going to happen for various reasons. Maybe it's because the application that they're working on had that kind of a need and they don't have that need, or they found something better for it. Maybe it's just that they tried it, it didn't fit their performance profiles. Maybe it's whatever. There's going to be some of that. But the lion's share of the archival that we're asking for and looking for is going to be stuff that people want to just upload and then upload incremental backups to it over time so that ultimately they have this long, ongoing, living, breathing archival storage that they can access anytime with indexability and the whole nine yards. So it's a beautiful subscription model. And so, let's say by year 2.5, suddenly now you're looking at your device and you've got, 15, 18 terabytes in there. Now you're getting paid against 15 to 18 terabytes. And all of a sudden, the kind of money you had hoped you were earning on a monthly basis when you first joined the project, because Nerdy Dude Stuff said you were going to earn, a Lambo a month. Now all of a sudden you're actually earning some pretty good chunk of change each month, and it's really, impacting your own personal bottom line based on what you're seeing being thrown through the unit on the payments every month. And then you start to really understand how it's going to work. By the time you get to the end, that little box is going to be valuable as fuck. I mean, it's going to be filled to the brim with storage that's getting paid month in and month out. And it's going to be something you're going to want to make sure stays operational. And it's going to be something that you're going to want to protect, and you're going to want to make sure it doesn't get damaged and doesn't get ruined. It doesn't get, like anything. It'll become like your favorite child. And that's really where all the money is going to aggregate on this deal, because when you have 60, terabytes of storage on a 64 terabyte unit, the thing's going to be bringing in a ton of money every month. Okay. And that's just how that works. And so what's going to end up happening is you're going to aggregate all those months together and sum them up at the end and then divide by 60, and you're going to come up with a number. And, one of the things that I've done is I've done 3 different sort of calcs. I've done rent plus incentives. If we're just paying you a straight flat $5 across the board. I've done one where if we're paying you $7.50, and I've done one where we're paying you 10. I think it will ultimately end up closer to the middle one, but I think 10 is not going to be out of line for a lot of different providers. What does that mean? Right now, we're asking you to accept $4 in rent, right? We've just sort of set that number because it's meaningless. It doesn't really equate to anything. We're just giving you all your storage as it is. So, $4 is a number we just came up with. But we've put our price online for our storage at $9.99 per terabyte per month. And that's the price we're going to lead with. We're not going down in the dirt with Wasabi. We're not going down in the dirt with Filebase. We're going to start with a number that makes sense. Amazon is $23 a terabyte. When you start adding egress and API touches, they're probably closer to 30. But at the end of the day, it's higher than 10. 10 is a good number. It says we're valuable, but it also says we're still less than Amazon by a country mile. So, if we give you 50% of it, that means 5 will ultimately be yours, and we'll be making that change soon enough for your pricing. But at the end of the day, we've also said, look, there's going to be incentives in case you have specific desirables that we need. So right now you're sitting there on your Xfinity residential internet and you've got 30 megabit upload. Yeah, that's not a desirable, right? That sucks. But when you start seeing the data get uploaded to your provider, and you're starting to feel pretty good about our marketing and sales efforts, and it's starting to look for real, you'll go out there and you'll start talking to Xfinity and say, well, how much is it going to cost to upload this to, gigabit? And then next thing you know, you'll start to have a much more desirable upload profile, which is, of course, the customer's download. So you'll get awarded for that with incentives. And then we've talked about other kinds of latency and performance incentives. The continuous time and service obviously is going to be another one. We'll come up with all kinds of different incentives that will help you to earn more than that base rent. And then, of course, we've just got our standard incentive number that's going to go on top. It won't be what it is right now, which is 75 per whatever, and still at a very high clip. But it will still be, pretty good. So somewhere between $7.50 and $10 seems pretty reasonable to me, where we can still earn money as a corporation on the storage that we sell. Now you're saying, wait, $10, Faust, and then you're going to go charge $10? How's that going to work? You're going to do some loss leadering or something? What's happening? Well, we've said this before. We've said, look, if some of you stand up really performant providers, or you stand up providers in a place where we really need them, or if you meet a certain high level of our, desirable characteristics, there's reasons for us to be able to go out and charge premiums for that with the customers. So like we may say $10 is our generic tier pricing, but then all of a sudden our telemetrics tell us that we can pull some 8% of the provider base out of the big population and say, this 8% rock. These are our rock stars. These are the ones who are performant as all get out. These are the ones that have uptime like you wouldn't believe. These are the ones who don't have any red bars. These are the ones that are just, God tier. And in the God tier, if you want to use the God tier, you're going to have to spend a little bit more money. And we can get that from our customers. That'll be an easy upsell to get from our customers. By the way, it's possible we'll have a down tier too, by the way, if for people that just want to stand up really shambolic, configurations to make a little bit of money, but they're not expecting all that much. Well, that's a potential thing that can happen too over time. And we might make a real sort of, IA or glacier type tier for people that we don't charge too much money for because it's just a bunch of assets that don't really cost all that much. So there's an ability there, and that is the kind of thing. Well, if you take that middle tier of $7.50 and you extrapolate that out on this really conservative data grow that I put over 60 months, where the unit ends up at 60 terabytes at the end of 60 months, you get an ROI for that unit of $7,400, right? You get that kind of money back against that unit. And if you turn around and then divide that back by the 60 months, all of a sudden, now you've got a device that's really, really pulling its weight. And it's pulling its weight way beyond what you're seeing from most of these other passive income earners that are out there. But that doesn't even take into consideration the coin price, right? That's just paying you in US dollars against a US dollar valuation. Now, storage miners aren't like ASICs. You don't have to pay big electric. At the end of the day, you stand one of these units up, and assuming you don't have to, pay monthly back because you took a loan out to buy the thing or something like that, then at the end of the day, what ends up happening is you ought to be able to sit on those coins. And if you don't agree that we're at the very early front end of this, then you shouldn't be here, because most likely what's going to happen is those coins are going to go up in value, and there's going to be strategic places along the way for you to go ahead and sell coins at a premium. So if the raw payback is going to be somewhere like $7,500 on that middle stratus, that doesn't even, consider what the actual coin appreciation is going to bring to the table. Talk to some of your friends about what you think the coin appreciation is going to look like. If you think the coin's going to go up 3x, I just, tripled that money for you, right? And if you think the coin's going to go higher than 3x, then you can start to get a real solid understanding about why some people are really enthusiastic about buying examiners right now, while others are completely and totally nonplussed and saying, why the fuck would anybody give you money for that thing? It's not earning any money. It's not ever going to earn any money. If you're taking a 2-month view, you're never going to make it. If you're taking a 5-year view, you recognize exactly what's going on. Now, it's all predicated on us selling the storage. That's it. But that's always been the case. If we don't sell the storage on our network, there's no reason for any of us to be here. It's literally our raison d'etre. So if you don't believe we're going to sell the storage, right, then this isn't the project for you. And, if I look back in 5 years and we haven't sold the storage, well, I guess I'll move on to baking cakes or something. I don't know. We'll figure out what our life mission is then. I think it's going to be closer to $10, by the way. And at $10, the base level of dollar income that you would get after that 60 months is about $9,900 on a 64 terabyte unit. You can drop it a little bit if you don't think you're going to get 60 terabytes in that period of time. You can go higher if you think that we're going to allow you to pull the drives out and put in the big latest greatest 440s. So you have 160 terabytes now. You can do all kinds of different juking of the numbers, but at the end of the day, I went pretty conservative on everything to arrive at a number that I think, most people could at least understand how we get there if they don't agree with it. So that's really the kind of deal there. Now, what I will say is the wait lists are over with the Examiners. The Examiners are going to go up on the site here this week or early next week, saying you can buy, even though there is a 2 to 4 week wait period to get your unit built. Chassis units just shipped from China. They're on their way over right now. We've got a large air shipment coming over. We've got a even larger boat shipment that will be taking off in the next day or two. And then they will be here. Then we've got a number of units that we have to complete that are already in the hopper. And then when those are done, we will begin to do the next ones. We've got components for thousands of units right now. So we are able to take as many orders as can come our way. We're willing to sell up to 3 to any individual person. So if you want to get involved, if you have wanted an Examiner, if you want to add more to your thing, the time is right. It's now. You can do it. And, whether or not you agree with the ROI calculations, I will be posting them online shortly, and you can draw your own conclusions about whether that makes any sense. Okay, next piece is the relayer update. I want to just cover that really quickly. So I did talk about that. We're today or tomorrow. We fixed a number of really sort of niggling smoke tested bugs that came out in our community usage and so forth. Pretty helpful stuff. Really thank everybody for taking part of that. And then there was the big one with provider selection not working correctly, and then that's going to be rolled in there as well. So this version that's coming out is going to be the thing. That's good and it's bad. And it's bad in that if you haven't taken advantage of the coupon that's in there for $50 worth of storage, that's going away. We will drop that significantly, that where people just joining the network will get a free tier, or they'll get some free use, but they won't get that amount of free use. So if you did get a coupon, it's yours. You can use it. And it doesn't have like a 30-day period or whatever. It's $50. You use it till it goes away. So and then you'll have to start paying for it behind it, obviously, if you want to keep online whatever you put up there. The thing is that there are people right now in our partnering section who are telling us about large amounts that they can online, and we are going to be working with them, and we will create some customized coupons so that we can help them to get a realistic understanding of how it's going to work without too much of a financial commitment on their part on the front end. But the understanding will be twofold, that as they onboard these larger swaths of data, that they owe us two things. One, they have to let us do a case study or white paper if it turns out that their use case made a lot of sense, so that we can put that up for online marketing onto the website. And two, that ultimately that they will continue forward and pay for the storage if it's working as expected and delivered the experience that they thought it would and ultimately need. So there stands a very good chance that over the next couple of weeks, we will onboard behind the scenes some bigger partners, and those bigger partners will begin to upload significant amounts of data. I don't know, I can't give you a number right now, but significant amounts of data, and you will start to see that show on the pink line. Cutting to the next piece and tying it in, that whole data loss thing, I'm never surprised by how people have viewed that thing. I don't get me wrong. I get it. You have 600 gigabytes worth of storage, and then you wake up tomorrow and it's 0. You're not feeling good. I get that. I totally get it. But at the same time, 600 gigabytes is nothing, number one. And number two, it was not real to begin with. Yes, it was paying real money, but you knew all along that this was testing data that we uploaded as part of our process to understand how things work. So when we get into the testing, quote unquote, of fixing stale contracts, and in that process, it blows away some of that testing data. So what? That's us. That's ours to do, right? That's exactly what we're supposed to be doing right now. It's not like we blew away anything that mattered. It may matter to you specifically for this month, but at the end of the day, it's stuff we have to get done before we ship this thing live to real people for real money. And so, we did that. Now,
because we're nice and because we understand and, we have empathy. I know that's a word all you libertarians hate, but we have a lot of empathy. The deal is that we're doing work behind the scenes to help bring it back for you. We are working to repopulate data specifically on the units that lost data. And, that is a thing that we're doing just because we want to keep you around and we don't want you to feel bad and we want you to start off on a good pedestal going forward. And we're going to leave that program to do that active for several months. So, look, you're going to be made okay and it's going to be good for you. And as we get into the end of the year, y'all are going to owe me a beer because, we're doing it right. We're doing things the right way. And in the end, you're going to get what you need. We're going to get what we need, and our customers are going to get what they need, which is the paramount thing that both you and us are striving towards, because that's what's going to keep that subscription revenue pouring in over the next 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 years. And that's how long we plan to be here. So, that's really kind of all that's going on there. All right, so that's all that. Talked a little bit about partners. If you are interested in becoming a partner, the opportunity does exist. What would happen is you would need to join the application channel and tell us what your partnering thing is. If I don't respond or if I don't get back to you immediately, it just doesn't mean anything. It just means we're building and aggregating a list, and we're going to go out and touch base with you along the way. And if your need and thing works and makes a lot of sense to do sort of a white paper or case study, we may reach out and ask you to do certain things. We may reach out and provide you with some credits. We may do some various kinds of profiling and ultimately even maybe some interviewing and stuff along those lines. So that's really kind of what's going on there. If you are interested in that, definitely fill it out. If it's, just sort of saying, well, I know some people who might, need to upload some backups. Yeah, I mean, definitely you can chime in and we will build a program for that. But at the end of the day, we're really looking for people that believe they can onboard real data pretty quickly. They already have a use case in mind. They already have a partner or somebody they work with that's doing it. They already know how to get that data, get it to here, even if it's a backup to a current strategy. So that's that situation. So anyway, there you go on that. Look through my notes because I think that's going to be the gist of most of the stuff. We do have an update coming out right now or in the next day or so to SPD, which will formalize that 164. 164 was mostly pushed out onto examiners just to do a certain kind of a testing process to understand something about contract formations. I guess I'm going to talk a little bit about our contracting architecture right now. I'm just kind of winging today's show, so, bear with me. But the deal on this current version is that we fix some stuff in our contractor that we think will make, protection of contracts more robust. But we're doing a number of things behind the scenes with contracting. So there's going to be another version of SPD introduced here that will actually be like 1641, I think, that will be the one that we ultimately release. And 1641 not only does add those current contract fixes, but it actually adds some additional debugging, because we've seen some stuff with contracting that we want to understand and fix, but we haven't really had much opportunity. And so we're going to roll out this debugging release. And then once we get this debugging release live and in production and we can see it for a few weeks, then we'll go back and we'll probably have another follow-up SPD .2, .3, .4, which will ultimately fix whatever the little hole is that we found. So you should be ready to be doing lots of SPD updates over the next several weeks, because they're going to be coming rapid fire and they're going to be coming all the time. Now, as time goes by, that's going to be one of the reasons you're going to want to update and upgrade from basic to full version of Examiner, because these updates, the Examiner folks just go ahead and pull those updates automatically. I think a lot of people earning passive income are going to want that. I think there's some people that won't want that, but that's okay. It's a process and they don't have to. But I think most people are just going to want the units to just do themselves. And that's what you're going to get, part of what you're going to get out of the full instance. Let's talk about the architecture of the contractor. So, look, we do a couple of things that qualify us as Web 2.5. I don't even know if that's a thing, but it's a thing in my mind. And Web 2, of the people that have built this notion is this idea of, well, you put together this decentralized network called the internet with TCP/IP and, other protocols. And then everybody was able to pile on, but a couple of individuals and companies were able to completely monopolize and essentially financialize and capture whole swaths of the internet and turn it dark. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but it's not like those services and features and tools are things that people didn't want. They are things that people need and want. And so ultimately, they wouldn't have gotten big if they weren't wanted. And the whole world isn't looking to throw any of that baby out with the bathwater. They're looking to throw some of the stuff out. They don't want Zuck looking around in their data. They don't want Jeff Bezos sticking his bald head into your data and understanding what it is and then handing it over to the NSA. NSA is going to come and get it anyway from Jeff, so he doesn't have to hand it over. But, at the end of the day, there are things that people don't like about that. Web 3 is this idea, well, we'll just turn the whole thing into a gigantic self-service gas station. Everybody will pump their own, and that's the way God intended it. But at the end of it, companies aren't going to buy that. They just aren't. They are not going to go out onto various little crypto exchanges and buy, big bags of coins to come back and feed all these different, tool sets so that they can self-service everything. That's just not going to work. Later on, over time, certain kinds of units of monetary value will rise to the surface that people will trust. And those will become things that people will go out and buy and populate these kinds of tools. And ultimately, we will get to that sort of Web 3, whatever you want to call it. But we think it's more of a gradation. And what will end up happening is that people will see the vitamins and benefits behind a big, radically distributed data center. They will understand that having encryption always done at the client side before anybody else has any access to that data, like in other words, we can't see your data before it gets encrypted. They will understand that sharding that data into 30, 60, 80, 90, 300 pieces provides durability and redundancy in ways that Amazon can't do right now. And they will start to see that whole security puzzle of us placing all this data online in what can only be called unhackable, right? Which is a crazy thing to say in 2022, but I don't think anybody looking at the architecture could say anything else. Once it gets to the network, it is unhackable. Today, look, quantum computing can come along, bust through the encryption. Yes, the future may hold something different. But today, it's unhackable. And if you did get through and bust through somebody, then you have to somehow figure out what the other 29 pieces where they live. So you're going to have to hack a whole bunch of things here to make it work. So when people see that security model and they understand what's going on, that's just one of the things that's going to draw people in. What's another thing? Environmentalism. I know a lot of you people don't care about green, but at the end of the day, green's going to drive the world in the next several decades. And people that are really environmentally conscious are going to get a lot of extra business over people that are going to just say, we don't care about any of that stuff. And right now, sinking giant architecture into a really nice, pristine forest, and then putting in a bunch of servers and air conditioners and drawing a ton of water to cool it and putting a bunch of people in parking lots that have to commute across the town all day long to get to this place. That's just not environmentally friendly. It's just not, But you shoving a couple examiners in your closet and closing the door is. Right? Because you're not using much extra electricity. Now, in aggregate, you might be using the same amount of electricity that they are, or maybe even a little more in aggregate, in order to power the units. You're typically not spending any additional money on cooling. And that's where they really, really rape the environment. They use up shitloads of water. They use up tons of power. They put together a lot of specialized cooling equipment in order to make this stuff, come down to a temperature that makes sense. And ultimately, all that stuff costs money, and it's ongoing money, and it's environmentally disastrous money. So that's going to be a big, 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 big reason why people are going to use this thing right out of the gate. Doesn't even matter if there's crypto involved. Doesn't have to be any crypto involved. It could be anything. We could be paying you with peanuts if you would accept them. But at the end of the day, it's a secondary reason why people will come to this distributed data center. And there are probably 3 or 4 really good ones that I can tack on. One of the other ones that we know is going to be a very useful one is that when you go to a CTO and say to them, look, at the end of the day, we're building this thing. It looks like this. Here's the architecture. Here's the security. Here's the environmental. Everything fits your profile good. You'll have indexability. You'll have performance and latency that matches what you're currently getting. You're going to get all your, capability to run the apps you're already currently running and so forth. But the last thing they're going to say to us is, look, I got a comptroller who is just, anal. And they're going to come into this meeting and they're going to ask us how we're paying for this thing. And 2 things got to be true when this meeting's over. One is that I know with certainty at the end of the month how much I'm going to pay you. And the second one is that I'm not going to have to pay you with some crazy coin that has a picture of a German Shepherd on it. I'm paying you in US dollars because US dollars are the reserve currency. And I'm not getting dinged by your billing department at the end of the month telling me that I owe you $32,000 extra dollars that I didn't plan on because the engineering team went nuts and started uploading all this crazy stuff. And we address both of those things by providing you a very clear cost per terabyte with no extra egress, no extra, API touch stuff. So you can calculate exactly what you're going to need. And then you pay us in Benjamins. That's just how it's going to go. Now, is the future pay us in Shepherd coins? Yeah, it is. It definitely is. The future is pay us in Shepherd coins. They don't exist yet, but when they do, it will be. And how's that going to work? Well, it's all about our contractor. Right now, the thing that is not decentralized in our project is our contractor. Our contractor is centralized. We handle all the contracting, and that's so that we can turn on and turn off your contracts, right? That's how we get you to pay us, right? If you had the contractor, then you wouldn't need us. You could just go ahead and form your own contracts and upload to the network and go forward. But at the end of the day, that isn't how we've set this up because of the things that I just said. What we've set up is a centralized contractor, and the central contractor started out being a single server and being very much not robust and being very much not protected and being very much a choke point and a linchpin technology that could sink the whole project if it got taken under. And we knew that. We knew we had to fix that up. And so what we've done is we've done a lot more hardening on that. We've done some cluster work. We've done some work with Kafka, and we've done some work on some pretty high-end stuff. And we're about ready to do some work on the development side of it that will further make it more robust and secure. And ultimately, when we, really start onboarding data, in mass and in real, the contractor that we currently go forward with is going to be able to handle and scale at the scale that we're going to need for a global cloud infrastructure. But what will happen over time, the roadmap, is that we will move that contracting out into a decentralized strategy, right? And it'll either be a secondary layer of relayers that circle the globe that everybody can access, or the relayers will have contracting built directly into them, and then you will have your own contractor and be able to work that way. We're not sure how it's going to turn out. We're not even sure when it's going to turn that direction. But that is our overall long-term goal. We expect fully to go to Web3 somewhere down the line. We just don't know when we'll get there, and we don't know when our customers will allow us to go there. But that has always been on the map. Well, a lot of the stuff that's going on right now that we're seeing in terms of challenges and wrinkles have to do with contracting, right? Because that's the key linchpin here. That's how this whole thing works. We contract you with these smart contracts. And as long as the contracts, go through and perform correctly and you're able to provide a storage proof behind them, then ultimately everything's good and you get paid. So, when there's problems with the contractor or the contractor's not renewing correctly or, they're stale contracts that, didn't get, fulfilled, or you were offline during, every single time when the contractor reached out, blockchain reached out to say, hey, what's the story here? Are you going to provide a storage proof? And you just happen to be offline like 8 times when it reached out to you. All the things that can happen with contracting over the internet become an issue. And ultimately, those are the things that we're currently working on, and what most of these SPD updates will be about over the coming weeks and months. We're continuing to make it more and more robust. We're continuing to make the contracts more and more, transparent, so that you can look at the error messages that they're kicking off and understand what's going on. And, ultimately making that contractor into a thing that essentially is bulletproof. It's pretty close right now, but there still is a lot of data on your units which live against contracts from that original single server contractor. And that thing is slowly but surely being phased out. And as that's happening, we're slowly but surely adding new data onto the new contractor architecture, so that ultimately it doesn't look like the pick line just drops off the map. I mean, literally, if we just shut down the old contractor tomorrow, which we could, there's no reason for us to leave it online other than it's got a bunch of data up there for you that we're paying you incentives and rent on. We could just take it offline. Of course, we'd lose about 700 or 800 terabytes of storage, and you people would all show up in my backyard and, like sing Christmas carols about how you're going to murder me. It just is what it is. So we'll keep that online for as long as it takes to age out gracefully and to continue paying you folks. And then sometime towards the end of this year, probably, that old contractor will go away and the new contractor will have all the data and contracts and so forth. So that's really where all the big work is going on. That's really where a lot of the nuance is happening, and that's where all of these SPD updates are going to take place. And of course, with contracting is also the place where we determine some things like licensing. Are you licensed? Are you a valid licensed user? Are you a basic? Are you a full? Are you an examiner? And that's all taking place in the contractor, and we're able to do certain things in the contracts specifically around those. We're also doing some things in there. I lost my train of thought there. Well, Pavel will remind me what my train of thought is. There's a thing in there that we're also working on, having to do with. I know what it is. I'm sorry. I'm old. It happens. What happens right now is the way the original guys built the software stack underneath this. I'm not really sure why either. It doesn't really make any sense. But if you had multiple storage folders, it randomizes where the data goes. So if you have a 3 storage folder environment and you have a contract, what happens is data gets uploaded and it just randomly goes to one or the other. There's no rhyme or reason to it. But if you're savvy and you recognize what it's doing right there, it's actually turning your kit into a RAID 0 configuration. It's really making your situation sort of fragile, because if you lose one drive or one storage folder, then the contract becomes invalid and you ultimately are at risk to lose everything. So that's not really a good thing. And we knew that this was an issue that we had to deal with. And so what we've done as a sort of a stopgap right now is everybody's unit in this new SPD will be fed on the first storage folder only. In other words, as data is being uploaded, it'll go to what we identify as your first storage folder until it's filled up. And by the time any of you start getting close to having that first folder filled up, we will move and get a new version of SPD out that has a little more involved logic to it in terms of how it fails over the first folder and moves to the second one, how it moves from the second one to the third one, but it will never be on a same contract. What we know that we're going to end up doing is, if you have four storage folders, we'll end up feeding you with 4 contracts, and might even be more. But ultimately, it will be at least 4, 1 for each one. And then ultimately, if any contract fails because any storage drive fails, it'll only take down that one bit of information. It won't take down the rest of your unit. So that was a real important one that we had to get out of the way before we actually started selling this live. Yes, a lot of that current online testing data is living in jeopardy on your units, and you could lose a lot of data if you lose one drive. It just is part and parcel of what it is. But remember, we are in the process of evolving and migrating data over to the new contractor. And as you get this new version of SPD out there and the forthcoming versions to come, what will end up happening is we will move you out of that scenario and into the more robust protected scenario. So that is big development work that we've been doing behind the scenes as well. Okay, that's it. That's all I got to say. I'm going to turn it over to questions now, and we'll see what we have there. Hang on a second. Let me come back to the deal. Come on up to the stage, unmute, ask your question. Probably forgot he had his hand raised. Okay, we had, oh, here we go. Come to the stage. Dead amp. There you go.
Yes, I just wanted to get an update on the 1U miners. When are they going to become available?
Well, the 1U is a funny situation. We could turn it loose right away if we wanted to. We actually could, but the reason why we aren't is because we're so overwhelmed with work right now that adding another potential support burden on top of it is just not something. I think what's going to happen instead, and I've said this in a previous AMA, I think what's going to happen instead is we will probably do relayer 1Us first. And the relayer 1U is likely to become a pretty important component of this project going forward. I just have this sort of feeling that a lot of our potential customers are going to want to just buy something that they can just plug in and go, that they aren't going to want to stand up their own relayers and do all of that work. If that turns out to be good and works out fine, then we probably will release in tandem or, in a staggered way right behind it, the 1U examiner. I know that runs contrary to what I said in the past, and I do have to apologize for that. And if you're mad because I'm not going to, give you good news about the 1U examiner, yeah, it's primarily just a resourcing issue for us. We could do it immediately. It would be simple for us to do it, but we just don't have the personnel. And I'm really trying hard to get the funding needed to increase our personnel, because we have a need across the entire platform to onboard more guys into our corporation. But it's just a thing. It's just a financial thing, I guess, really at this point. I will say this. I can give you the specs of the unit that we've done and that we do expect to do for the model numbers and the ones. And if you decide you want to stand one up yourself, you can then pair it up with a full license, and you can sort of ghetto build what will become our actual examiner when it's ready to go. It's just about 6 to 8 weeks, though, before that full examiner port software is done that you could load on there. So that would be the only thing that's holding you back. Sorry, I don't have a good answer for you. It's just where we are. Okay. Arctic Comic, come to the stage.
Hey, I'm maybe a little bit behind here on what exactly the deal is, but I know you talked about, using green as like one of the basis for selling this things. Is there any thoughts? I know you had talked about this a while ago, but there were any thoughts about switching to like a proof of stake sort of model for the coin?
Yeah, that's a great question. The deal is that we talked about proof of stake over a year ago. In fact, we actually announced that we were going to do it, and the reason why we did, what was driving that was not environmentalism, but was actually the fact that one farm had more than 50% of the hash rate. And ultimately, we felt very scared that we were looking at a 51 attack coming as soon as we launched the product. But then things changed, and we got higher levels of hash rate that really kind of made that not such an issue that we could slow down on it. but I'm sensitive to the whole thing because I think it's really stupid that people talk about Bitcoin miners being sort of like a driver towards, you know, renewables and all that. Just it's just it's just shoddy defenses. I mean, at the end of the day, burning electricity in this fashion for this reason just seems really stupid. I mean, it just really is. But it is where we are. And proof of stake does solve this. So yeah, it does still have resonance with us. It does still have, I think, a viable path. And I think what's going to end up happening is, in my perfect world, this is what kind of happens. I'm going to open the kimono a little bit on this. You know, we've been trying to gain a little bit higher level funding from some of our angel type, you know, investors. We haven't had a lot of success. I don't, know why. I'm going to ascribe it mostly to my own incompetence. But at the end of the day, we need to get a couple $1,000,000 right now in order to do two things. One is get some more personnel on staff, and two, to be able to fund marketing and sales so we can get out there and really sell the storage. Well, one of those things that we really know that we want and need to do is we do need to change that consensus model to that proof of stake ultimately at some point. But there's also the need to change what underlies the SPF token, which is on our network as well. Because if it's just running on our deal, it really doesn't have the same kind of ability to generate interest and excitement as it does if it was running on Ethereum, for instance, or if it was running on some other layer one. And I think ultimately there is some potential value even at some point to change our thing from a consensus blockchain that is under our control that turns into some other layer one that is far more performant, has far more developers on it, has far more, battle testing underneath it, and ultimately allows us to do some things. Our lead developer is sitting in today, and I think he's probably horrified to hear that because he's made the case that it's going to be a gigantic programming effort. But I think ultimately it's one we're not going to get away from. It's one we're going to have to do. But it is going to require a couple, 2 or 3 really, really good blockchain engineers, Golang engineers, and I just can't afford it right now. So, yes, it's still a thing, and yes, it's coming. Unfortunately, that's probably a little further out on the roadmap, but it's 2023 for sure. I just don't know where in 2023 it fits. So hopefully that'll answer that question.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, can you hear me?
You can.
Awesome. I think I saw somewhere where you had mentioned there were going to be some potential changes to the warranty for the extra miners. Any updated information on that?
I actually did have that on my notes to cover a little bit today, and I apologize that I didn't. Yeah, we're actually building a new XCare program. And for anybody who's purchased the XCare or is interested in purchasing the XCare, you will get grandfathered one way or the other into this program. But we're talking about building a significantly upgraded. I hate to call it an extended warranty because it's really so much more than that. It's more like the old days of what AppleCare used to be, but it's even more than that. Look, if you subscribe to this notion that I presented at the beginning, that the units are going to start off being worth about what they're worth, right? So like you buy a unit from us today for $3,500 and it's worth about $2,000. Well, we're going to give you back $1,500, and so you got a unit that's worth a couple grand that costs a couple grand. So no harm, no foul. If you had to liquidate it, you probably could, or at least get close to the value, and so you're okay. But if you subscribe to this notion that by year 6 or month 60, that the unit's going to have a serious amount of data on it and it's going to be super valuable, then you're going to probably want to pay a little bit of extra money in order to ensure that that unit is taken care of, that we have ways to overnight components to you no matter where you live in the world, that we have regional repair centers that allow you to only go out of service for a very short period of time, that we have ways to replace drives that are quick, clean, and easy, that don't involve what currently happens, which, you know, there's a lot of pain and suffering in terms of component replacement right now. So yes, there is definitely going to be an update. Unfortunately, it's not going to be, you know, $60 or $80. It's going to probably be a little more expensive to get into an XCare program. But I think ultimately, once everybody sees this ROI understanding and really starts to get that into their guts, they will start to recognize that it's something that they want to do. And it won't be a thing that will say you have to buy it now, but there will be certain time deadlines where, you know, buying it will be more favorable than others, right? So it might be that if you buy it early, you get a discount on it, you get a price that's really nice going forward because you're covering it the whole period. But if you show up once the thing's really super valuable and want it, maybe at that point there's a premium because, you know, we know that it's older, there's more likely to be failures, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. We haven't totally gamed it out yet. But what we do know is that we need a much more robust XCare program. And what that includes is next day air shipping on, so like if something fails, typically right now it's a depot warranty. So what would typically happen right now is you would send the unit back to a repair facility. However you want to send it, you would have to pay for the freight to send it back. Once we got the unit, we would repair or replace and send it back to you. We send it back UPS ground or a comparable international shipping. And then, you know, you could be out the unit 2 weeks, you know, it might be. And so you're going to miss some storage proofs, you're going to lose some money and blah, blah, blah. And then you get the unit back. That's the depot warranty. That's what everybody has right now on an Examiner. What you'll have the ability to do under an XCare program is, you know, we will just automatically ship you, you know, a unit or a component overnight. And then, you know, you're on your best behavior to send back the offending piece to us on your nickel at, you know, your convenience. Could come back ground, slow boat, whatever, you know, so you don't have to pay very much to ship it back. But ultimately, the other thing will end up being is that we are talking and have, you know, a couple of people already set up for regional repair facilities. So you won't be sending it back to the United States, and the units coming to you won't be coming from the United States. So they'll get to you much quicker, and ultimately you'll have less downtime. The other thing that we'll include in XCare, so right now it's pretty clear that our support people are going crazy helping people. I mean, they just help like crazy. It's nobody does support like this right now anymore, and that's not going to continue. I mean, it can't. We're going to move to more fact-based support. We'll move to videos. We'll move to this online chat capability that we have baked into the Examiner now. We'll move to ways that are more traditional for most people. But if you have XCare, the ability to talk to a human being rapidly is going to be part and parcel of that. So for ongoing support needs and so forth, that will be a thing. I'm not saying that our guys won't hang around in the community still, but they won't be doing what they're doing right now, which is just going all out to build this project. Going forward, XCare will be the way to get that kind of, you know, white glove treatment and capability. So yes, great question. Yes, there will be something. I don't have an announcement on it yet today. I don't have the exact particulars of it, but it's coming, and it will be something you can, you know, purchase it, you know, after the fact and have it paired up with your account and go forward.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I had, and maybe this is a little above and beyond, but maybe you could bake it into the price. If you end up losing contracts based on a drive that fails that is under warranty, could some of that loss of collateral be reimbursed? Maybe half, maybe a percentage. And again, maybe that's too much, but just an idea I had.
It's a good idea, and I think we probably do need to look into that. And I think there's a way to amortize that. I think we can do some actualization, or however what that word is that you use, that insurers use. You know, I think we can look across at how many contracts typically get lost over a period of time and why, and ultimately come to some sort of conclusion of how we can quote unquote insure it. I think that makes sense because, yeah, I mean, that's part and parcel of what you're trying to prevent the loss of. So that's sort of a deal. There's also still this underlying thing of stateless relayers where, you know, potentially a contract could be resurrected from the network itself. It's a rocket science project that we need to do,
but ultimately that could help solve that going forward in the future as well. But yeah, good point, and something we will definitely consider as we bake together the part number.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks. Simon, last chance. I think he accidentally raised his hand. Might be wrong. You can see him slowly creeping up to the stage right now. No? Not creeping? Okay, guys, we made it to the end of another one. Hopefully the information was helpful today. Hopefully you guys are still as pumped and as enthused about the project as you've been all along. I will tell you that if you're not, you should be, because right now we are right on the edge of moving from one thing to another. There's very few of these that come along where you can really clearly, truly see that, but I feel strong enough about our network now that I would actually accept money for a storage that's stored on our network, where prior to this time I wasn't really there, but I'm there now, and ultimately that means that we're going to be able to go out there and really start onboarding customers. Doesn't mean the thing's perfect, doesn't mean the relayer works perfectly, doesn't mean it's easy to set up, doesn't mean you can run it on 4 gigs of memory, it doesn't mean any of that. It just means that if you stand up the relayer to our specs, if you use it based on the kind of storage models that we are after, that we're seeking right now in the beginning, and it means that if you have an understanding of what is needed from a network perspective and so forth, that our tool works, and it can work very well against the really robust, performant, and durable storage network that you people have stood up out there around the globe. And ultimately, that bodes really well for all of us, because that means we're going to start actually getting real data, and real data means real money, and real money is a good thing. So thanks a lot for showing up. Appreciate it. If you have any questions, you know where to post them. Any interest or feedback or anything about the call, you know where to post it in the events discussion channel. And yes, I promise Master will come back next week and you can hear his melodious voice and so forth. I just felt like this week I needed to just kind of get in here and riff a little bit, and I did. Hopefully the call was valuable to you. Thanks for showing up.